Tonight on the In All Kinds Weather Forecast, we have In All Kinds of Weather by the numbers. Dustin Smith joins us to update his model and all the week one action, recapping and how it impacts us going forward. This is the In All Kinds Weather Forecast. And welcome in to another episode of the In All Kinds Weather Forecast Special Edition by the numbers. Dustin Smith joining me here, and I am your host, Chris Yanes. You can follow me at Mr. Chris Bits and Dustin at IAKOW Dustin. Also want to shout out our sponsor. The In All Kinds Weather Forecast is proudly sponsored by 401k Generation, the wealth management company that helps you invest today for your future tomorrow. Their team of advisors is committed to providing guidance and education for your 401k plan and its participants, and they also offer a range of enrollment solutions tailored to meet the unique needs of your company's 401k plan. Whether it's savings for your child's college, investment advice, or even your retirement, 401k Generation's team of advisors makes getting to know you their top priority. Their advisors will tailor a path to assist you in navigating life's financial milestones and reaching your financial goals. 401k Generation, building stronger futures, one generation at a time. For more information, contact them at 866-998-5879 or visit their website at 401kgeneration.com. And for all of us watching here on the YouTube channel, make sure that you're liking this episode down below. Make sure you've hit that subscribe button and leave a comment on what you think of all of the action that's happened this past week in college football and your thoughts. You don't have to necessarily talk about the Gators. Maybe you might not want to right now, given our situation, but leave your thoughts down below in the comment section. We'd love to hear what you think about Dustin's model thus far and its week one results. If you looked at those lines and used it to your betting advantage. So Dustin, I'm going to welcome you in here. This is another exciting episode to be back together. This is the first time since last season we've done this. You did a great job last week introducing your model to all of Gator Nation and our listeners and watchers on YouTube. So tell us, what are the takeaways? I mean, I think all the fans want to know the takeaways from the Miami game, your takeaways, and then give it some context as to the impact of the Gators ranking in your model.
Well, first off, Chris, you were out for a very good reason. You were celebrating your wife's birthday, so a very happy belated birthday to her. I know she's certainly a special part of the In All Kinds of Weather family, and just wanted to give her the shout out.
She'll appreciate that. We'll make sure she watches the show, so she'll appreciate that, Dustin.
Absolutely, yeah. It's a blessing to be able to talk shop and to be able to talk football, not just the Gators, but college football in general. It's a great sport, and unfortunately, while the weather is kind of rocky in Gator Nation, there's certainly a lot of great things that y'all spoke about in the previous episode. I mean, y'all did a great job breaking down the Miami game, so we don't really need to dive into that a whole lot with this episode. We'll certainly look at how that game and how that outcome shook up the top 25 rankings. Certainly Florida has a lot left to be desired. They certainly did not put the performance that the model expected. I mean, the model liked Florida in the game. I'm not going to mince words. The model got it wrong, and it's frustrating, not only as a Gator fan, but as somebody who really cares about getting things right. It's one of the few games that the model missed on. But one thing I'll say is this: the model is a big, for lack of a better word, it's a big machine. It takes in data and then it outputs a prediction. And sometimes you have bad data coming in. And if you have bad data coming in, you're going to have a bad result coming out. And the Gators did, at least coming into the season, it appeared they did an amazing job in the transfer portal. They recruited enough top 25 talent in order for that element of their ranking to be pretty darn good. But certainly as the season goes on, as games are being played, advanced stats come in, and certainly across the board, the advanced stats for the Florida Gators were putrid in that game. Success rate, putrid. Offensive line play, putrid. Defense, putrid. Line by line, data point by data point. the Gators were dominated by Miami. And so when we go through our top 25, we're going to see Miami rise. And spoiler alert, Florida's no longer in the top 25, and rightfully so.
Yeah, no, definitely rightfully so. And actually, excuse me, there's excuse me, there's some teams that Florida is going to be playing ahead of its schedule here in the next couple of weeks that rose in this top 25. So not only did Florida get worse, but its future opponents seemingly got better in the model. And actually, one of those was UCF as they just cracked the top 25. So Dustin, do we want to go? Let's go ahead and get into it. Let's unveil your
Let's get
top
into it.
25 and let's take a look at the updated rankings and let's see which teams have risen and fallen and as it relates to the remainder of Florida's schedule.
Yeah, I'm going to dive into the numbers. I know that you have in front of you the top 25 as well. If you want to get into some of the specifics in terms of what their power ranking index, what the team's power ranking index is, or how how far they rose or how far they fell, because some teams actually rose in the rankings, but their index actually lowered. It's just part of the nuance of the model and how the data is resolved end to end, and we can get into all that after the reveal. But we'll start at number 25. You know how we do it. If you were here last week, you saw how we did it last week. We'll keep doing it the same way. At number 25, as you mentioned, Chris, we have the Central Florida Knights. I think we have a tradition on this show of not calling them UCF, but Central Florida. For me, it's the team about 6 miles to the north of where I'm currently sitting right now, and in Orlando, Florida. Number 24, you have Kansas. 23, you have Arizona. 22, Kansas State. So we have two teams from the great state of Kansas in the top 25. At number 21, we have Texas A&M. They fell a little bit after their close loss to Notre Dame. Utah comes in at number 20, and a team that is probably going to end up falling a little bit more. But of course, this top 25 is developed Monday morning, and Florida State looks to not be having the best performance against Boston College while we're recording this episode. And so currently Florida State is 19. That may change with a midweek update that we'll do right before the games on Saturday. So 19 is Florida State, 18 Louisville, 17 Auburn, 16 USC, the real USC, as we like to call it. Not to troll our South Carolina friends, but they have the storyline, they have the history. So the real USC. Number 15 Clemson, 14 Michigan, 13 Missouri, 12 rising up 8 spots in our top 25, and rightfully so. We have the Miami Hurricanes. 11 we have LSU, 10 Ole Miss, 9 Tennessee, 8 Oklahoma, 7 Oregon, who actually fell a little bit in their lackluster season opener. Notre Dame rises a few spots up to 6. We got Penn State at 5, Alabama at 4, Texas at 3, Ohio State at 2, and Georgia at 1.
Yeah, so it looks like the top two remain the same. Ohio State, Georgia both had very impressive performances in their opener, especially Georgia beating the number 15 team in this power ranking 34-3. You look at a team like Florida State, obviously they stick out, dropping 8 spots from their upset loss to Georgia Tech. And I do think if they end up losing this game to Boston College or they end up winning very closely, I would have got to imagine they're going to fall once again. But look at Arizona and UCF, high risers there. 20 spots for Arizona, 10 spots for UC, Central Florida, beg your pardon. So, and then Miami did a great job of rising as well, 6 spots up to 12, almost cracking the top 10. So those were some of the big names that stick out to me. And Dustin, the other thing that sticks out to me is I just counted it. Florida still has 8 teams left to face ahead of them in this ranking. Could you let the listeners and our watchers know where Florida fell? Because going into the matchup against Miami, they were 19 in the power ranking. Where did the Gators fall in this updated one? Obviously not in the top 25.
To put it into context, in order for me to find where Florida fell to, I have to go to a separate spreadsheet.
Oh, second tab or something like that, right?
Yeah, exactly. So Florida fell to number 37 in
Wow.
the country. They're
So 20,
yeah,
almost 20 spots.
yes. Yeah, they were 19, so they fell I think 18 spots.
And we see 8 teams ahead of them. Is Kentucky ahead of them? I don't see Kentucky in the top 25, but is Kentucky, just out of curiosity, are they ahead of them?
This is editor Dustin here, and I just wanted to say that in the updated top 25 for the power ranking, Florida State has dropped out. So while this is not depicted in the show was live recorded on Monday night during that football game. Of course, the model is run Monday morning. I do want to say that the Florida State Seminoles have dropped out of the poll, and that will be reflected officially in the next week's update. Thank you so much. Back to the actual show. Yeah, so let's go ahead and go through the SEC top 20 or
Yep. Oh, that's
the
yep. Let's,
SEC top 16. It's almost 20 teams. Maybe in a few years when they have two power conferences, maybe the SEC will have 20 teams. Anyhow, so let's quickly go through this. 16 Vanderbilt, 15 South Carolina, 14 is where Florida is now. Mississippi State, who Florida is going to play in just a few weeks, is at 13 in the SEC, and then Kentucky, you have 12. And so if you look at their national spot,
yep.
Kentucky is actually number 28 in the country in the power rankings. Arkansas is number 11 in the SEC. A&M is 10. Auburn is 9. Missouri is 8. 7 is LSU. 6 is Ole Miss. 5 is Tennessee. 4 is Oklahoma. 3 is Alabama. 2 is Texas. And number 1, of course, is the Georgia Bulldogs.
And I think it's just highlights, it's astounding how competitive the SEC is. Ole Miss is the 6th power ranked team in the SEC, yet they're in the top 10 nationally. So you have 6 out of the
Yes.
10 teams currently in the top 10. And, everybody said when we expanded the playoff to 12 teams, they joked at the possibility of half of those teams being from the SEC. But just looking at this power ranking shows that it's a real possibility this
Yeah.
season because, outside of the automatic bids, you could have almost an entire playoff of at-large bids from the SEC just due to the fact of how competitive it really is. And,
Yeah.
and now Florida, all of the remaining SEC opponents are ranked ahead of them. Going into the season,
Yes.
Kentucky and Mississippi State were behind them. So now Florida, I'm curious to know, Dustin, where we're looking at now in the updated schedule and record projection for the model. Because what this is telling me, a road game at Mississippi State, in a home game against Kentucky where Florida is almost 3 points behind Kentucky in their overall rating, I got to think Florida might not be favorites in all those games now where they originally were.
Yeah. Yeah, it was very tight with the previous model update where Florida was projected very narrowly to go 8-4. Two of those games were pure toss-ups. I mean, you're talking less than a point separating the two teams in the adjusted power ranking with the home field advantage. And certainly one of the nuances of the way this system projects outcomes in football games is the I'm trying to find the right word for it. There's a secret sauce when it comes to adjusting for home field advantage because not every home field environment is the same. Some home field environments really make a difference and others don't. And ironically, once Miami got it going, the swamp really became a non-issue in that game for them. So
No doubt.
that's something that the model attempts to resolve, and it's something that is improving week to week. So let's go ahead and dive into the updated season simulation. So obviously, Florida lost 41-17 in the game against Miami. I can't even get the words out. That game was so frustrating. The Samford Florida game. Florida's expected to win that. I'm gonna go ahead and give the score in just a little bit, but Florida is given a 93 or a 99.3% chance to win that game. The following week against Texas A&M, oddly enough, Florida is still projected to win that game by 2 points.
Wow.
Florida does have a 57% chance to win that game, so Hopefully, Florida can pull out the dub. If Florida loses to Texas A&M at home, then we're probably looking at a 2-10 type season, or maybe a 1-11, which would, well, I mean, not even the Samford game is a guarantee. I mean, the model likes Florida to win 99% of the time, but there's still that 1% chance that Samford pulls off the upset and Billy Napier gets fired immediately. Um, I hate to say it like that, but I don't think that there's a scenario where he doesn't get fired if he loses to Samford. Um, Anyhow, the following game, Florida is playing at Mississippi State. As I mentioned before, home field advantage plays a big difference. Mississippi State is actually just ahead of Florida in the power ranking index. Florida is 37 in the country. Mississippi State is 36 in the country. And so it is no surprise that Mississippi State at home is projected to beat Florida. They have a 63% chance to win, and the model would consider Mississippi State to be a 6-point favorite in that matchup. The following week, you have Florida playing UCF at home. Florida would actually be a 4-point favorite in that game with a 57% chance to win. After that, you have Florida playing a now considered to be juggernaut in Tennessee, and Florida is likely to get blown out in that matchup. Tennessee has an 80% chance to win. Florida, of course, has a 20% chance to win. The following week after that, and this is probably Florida's last chance to get a victory in the season, and you have Florida with Kentucky coming into the swamp, and Florida is a 5-point favorite in that matchup with a 59% chance to win. Of course, after that, we have the gauntlet schedule, the schedule that everybody across the country has been speaking about since before the season. You have Florida losing to Georgia. I'm not even going to go through the percentages. Honestly, it's not a big deal. I'm just going to go ahead and go through and share how big the opponent is favored to beat Florida. So you have Georgia favored by 23. Then Florida plays LSU. LSU's favored by 5. Then Florida plays Texas. Texas is favored by 21. You have Florida playing Ole Miss, this time in the swamp. Ole Miss is still favored by 4 points. Would it be surprised, though, if that game looks a lot like the Miami-Florida game with how stout Ole Miss is, especially in the offensive side of the ball? And then, of course, you have the big-time matchup in Tallahassee. As the season goes on, I would not be surprised if this matchup gets closer, but Florida State is currently favored by 13 points against the Gators in Tallahassee. So that's your matchup. That's your prediction. So if you go game by game and you predict the outcome, the Gators, just by putting the result they put on the field against Miami, they go from being projected to win 8 games and lose 4 games to now winning 4 games and losing 8 games.
Wow.
Now, the last thing I'll say is if you go game by game and you add up all the percentages, that's something that Chris, I know you and Neil have done this before in projecting out the schedule, adding up all the percentages. The win-loss count for the Gators actually goes up 1 game. And so overall, Florida is still projected to win 5 games and lose 7. So this would be equivalent to that 4.5 win over under. So the
Yep.
model would still pick the over on the win total for Florida. Certainly, this is a little more than that 2-10 that we were expecting, but of course, that includes a big time victory against a ranked in the model, at least a ranked Texas A&M team. We'll see where they're at when it comes time for that game in the swamp, and then getting a victory against Central Florida as well as Kentucky. If Florida loses any of those games, then that win total will go down from 4. And so, certainly, this is not the season we're hoping for. This is not even the season that we were expecting coming into it. But this is the reality that we're facing. You know, it's really easy to get emotional when it comes to the Gators. I certainly am very passionate. We all know how passionate Chris you are. We all know how passionate Neil is. But the beauty of having a model is it's no longer about emotion. We have raw numbers, we have data, and unfortunately, the data is very telling.
It's square hitting us right in the face right now,
Yes.
unfortunately, and that it's a big uphill climb. And I do think the tune of Gator Nation could be a little less than it is now if we were to
Yeah.
beat Texas A&M. But honestly, just based on what I saw in the opening game, how unprepared we looked against Miami, and how honestly prepared A&M looked against Notre Dame, a top 10 team in their first game of the tenure of a new head coach, they looked the part. They looked fine. So, I honestly right now find it difficult to believe. To honestly, I'd pick Florida to beat A&M in 2 weeks, but we'll see how Florida looks this week against Samford. Hopefully, they get a big resounding win at home. Of course, we're still waiting to hear the status of Graham Mertz, as he
Yeah.
is in concussion protocol. He did not practice today. He will be continuing to go through the protocol, and we should get an update later in the week if he is good to go, or if true freshman DJ Lagway will get his first college start in only his second game as a Florida Gator. All right, Dustin. Well, I think this was a really good update, and really invite all of our fans to continue to follow Dustin on his Twitter. He's going to continue to put out these power rankings every single week. He's going to continue to put out his games of the week and how he thinks they're the best bets, and if you should be betting for those teams or not, or if you should be betting against the lines. Follow along Dustin on his Twitter handle, as you can see, and you'll see some really insider information you're not going to get from anywhere else. All right, Dustin, let's wrap this show up. Let's get to your quick breakdown. 2 keys and a padlock stack plus the projection for the Samford game.
Yeah, so first off, I think my blue light went out. We'll get that fixed. Just working on some technical things. Kind of reminiscent of the Florida season, the blue lights out. Anyhow, Florida should absolutely destroy Samford. If this game looks anything like the last time Florida played Samford, we're in big trouble, right? If it takes putting 70 points on them to come out with a comfortable win, then the Gators are toast. Certainly, regardless of if Graham Mertz can play in the game or he's kept out due to his concussion protocol, I certainly look for Lagway to get a ton of playing time, and I certainly hope to see Lagway get some big time touchdowns through the air. I think he's somebody that at least early on in his drives against Miami, he looked a little flustered. Certainly, that terrible offensive line play will do it. Some of the balls that he threw were behind the receiver, and I look to see him get that right against Samford. I think he's going to do it. I think he's going to be on the money, and certainly if Graham Mertz has the chance to come in, I think he'll also take a few steps forward. Certainly, Graham Mertz was an excellent player last year, one of the most efficient quarterbacks in the country, and I expect that to be a continuation. I know certainly the entire Gator team from top to bottom, with maybe the exception of a few special teams players, had a well below average grade out. Certainly, Florida looks to improve, and certainly Florida will improve. I know they have a lot to play for, at least internally. Certainly, there's a lot of noise outside, but that doesn't matter. The Gators, on the defensive side of the ball, it would be great to see a defensive touchdown, though we haven't seen one of those in a long time. So it would certainly be epic if we could get a fumble taken to the house or an interception taken to the house. Certainly, that would give the defense confidence even against a subpar team in Samford. Now, a padlock stat, I'm not going to give a padlock stat for winning the game. If I have to do that for this matchup, then I think the Gators are in a world of trouble. Certainly, Samford lost last week to an FCS opponent. If Florida has any kind of struggle with Samford, then all jokes aside, you may want to just shut down the season. And I, I look, I want to be positive, but there's going to literally be 0 ounce of positivity in Gator Nation if there's any struggle this coming weekend in the swamp. So as far as a padlock stat, I'm gonna give a positive outlook padlock stat. So if the Gators do this, then Gator fans will be somewhat happy. Somewhat, okay? And that is if we're up by at least 40 points going into halftime. I think if we do that, I think if we're up 42-0 or something in that realm, I think the Gator Nation will be pretty happy. Now, getting to the model pick for the game, the model actually does pick Florida by the score of 49-3. And if you break down each quarter, it does actually like the Gators to be up 42-0 going into the half, and then looking at some of the garbage time after, putting some of the walk-ons in. Uh, the model understands how conservative Billy Napier is, so it considers that second half to be a 7-3 affair for the Florida Gators in Samford. So certainly, Chris, I know that we're certainly looking forward to Florida getting a dub on the schedule. Dubs are going to be very hard to come by this season, so hopefully we get that against Samford this week. It really
Yeah.
would be nice if we did.
The first victory since October of 2023 against the South Carolina Gamecocks in the dramatic Ricky Pearsall catch from Graham Mertz. I don't think a lot of us would have ever fathomed that that would be the case, but here we are. And also, it would be the
Yeah.
first home victory since homecoming against Vanderbilt last season in October of
Yes.
2023. So we got to get this one, Dustin. We got to get this one for sure. And it does appear that the model thinks that the Gators will at least get a feel-good victory, but certainly a lot more worry ahead on the horizon based on what we saw in the power rankings tonight. All
Yes.
right. Well, Dustin, appreciate you hopping on here tonight to talk about the numbers. This is another special episode of All Kinds of Weather by the Numbers episode. We will be doing these every single week, dropping them midway through the week so everybody is able to see those updated numbers that Dustin will be putting out. And make sure, if you're not already following us here on our YouTube channels, hit that subscribe button down below. Like this episode. Let us know your thoughts on Dustin's updated model. And if you're listening on all audio platforms, please rate and review the show. It helps us bring Gator Nation more great content. So thank you, Dustin, from all of us here at the All Kinds Weather Forecasts. I'm your host, Chris Yanes. Dustin Smith signing off. Go Gators. We'll see you in the swamp on Saturday.